Are we just holding up ground slam here? Is that the play? That might actually be the play. Oh god. Oh chat. What's going on, guys? Mully here, and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra deck guide here on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about a deck that quite a few players have tried and have also deemed nearly unplayable. But after building my own take on it, I think it's better than people give it credit for, and that deck is Taliyah Malphite. It's a deck that I've actually been climbing the rank ladder with a little bit the past few days. As always, I'll go over the deck's game plan, some of the card choices I've made, and why they're in this version of the deck, as well as cards that are seen in this deck that I've decided not to play, and why. We'll then go over the mulligans and some of the most popular matchups, and finally we'll jump into some gameplay afterwards. The guide portion of this video is going to be longer than usual since this is effectively a new archetype that's only been around for a month now, and I feel like not a lot of people have spent a ton of time trying to optimize. This deck tends to get written off by people in the community, especially Malphite himself. So I want to do a more detailed guide and try to address some of those concerns. Anyway, the game plan of this particular version of the deck is pretty straightforward. We want to start the game off by playing early units in combination with cheap landmarks, control the board with the Roiling Sands landmarks we generate, and force trades with vulnerable units where our units stay alive but our opponents don't. Similar to other mid-range decks that look for those same 2-for-1s. On round 4, we want to set up Salt Spire, as long as we have a board to defend ourselves, and in most games this deck will. On round 5, we want to play Taliyah, copying our Salt Spire. By the time round 6 starts, we should have 2 5/4 Rock Bears, a Taliyah that is ideally level 2 by this point, and whatever else is still alive from the early game. This is usually where you want to bank at least 2 spell mana for the next round, where you'll play Malphite, and as long as you've summoned even 1 2-mana landmark, he will level up immediately and give you unstoppable force to set up a big attack. You then use it to stun your opponent's board. They'll only have 1 chance to play 1 more blocker, and then you attack for a ton of damage and hopefully win the game on that round. So pretty simple. Where some of the gripes come in is that a lot of players believe Malphite needs Overwhelm. I personally don't, because the whole point of Malphite is to stun your opponent's entire board with unstoppable force, so you don't need Overwhelm. Some have also said Taliyah needs it for similar reasons, which I also disagree with. I'll kind of get into why this is when we talk about Salt Spire later on, a card that I've seen some players not run at all in this deck, which I think is a mistake, and why they're wishing Malphite had Overwhelm, because they have no board by the time they play him due to not running Salt Spire. But let's get into the card choices. We're running Chip because I would say Blue Sentinel is core to this archetype currently. Some people like to run Rite of Calling in their Taliyah Malphite decks, but it's pretty hard to fit in, and there aren't really any other targets in this version that Rite of Calling has synergy with to fetch a champion, so I opted to not run any. Blue Sentinel is a good blocker against Ezreal since when it dies you get a landmark. You usually want to try to time it to where you can benefit from the extra mana the landmark gives you on the next turn. But it's not that big a deal if you can't, since worst case scenario you end up banking it as spell mana. Blue Sentinel and Rockhopper are in here for the same reason, to at least give us access to a 2-mana landmark on board and activate Chip as early as possible. All I'll say on Merciless Hunter is that it's not part of Taliyah's or Malphite's support package, but we need it to be able to actually target units we want to remove with vulnerable, since Roiling Sands can be unreliable if opposing decks have ways to get around them, and some of them do. This card is super pushed, and every Shurima deck that's unit focus, which is most of them, should probably be running it right now. Desert Naturalist was originally put in here as a way to deal with Emperor's Deus from Ezreal, since it's one of the most mana efficient ways to do it, mainly because you get a 2/4 in addition to removing Deus. But the other reason I put it in here was because we have multiple cards that generate Roiling Sands. If you have 2 Roiling Sands out from Unraveled Earth or Rockhopper, don't be afraid to sacrifice one of them to your Desert Naturalist so you can make a 5/4 Rock Bear, especially if it puts you ahead on board. For example, let's say you have Malphite out and 1 or 2 other units, but you also have 2 Roiling Sands and you're trying to set up a board where you can swing for lethal. You can sacrifice one of your Roiling Sands to Desert Naturalist, and you'll end up getting 2 bodies for playing the Naturalist. Then you can Unstoppable Force, stun their board, and have enough damage for lethal. In most situations when you do that, even if they play another unit, they'll be forced to play a fast spell of some kind that takes one of your units out of combat. All that being said, I am likely going to replace Desert Naturalist and either a copy of Unraveled Earth or a copy of Hush for 3 copies of the Fangs, since I think it'll provide more utility and gives us a slightly better matchup against Azir Irelia, since it's a constant source of lifesteal unless they can get rid of it. And Azir Irelia has very few ways of removing enemy units compared to other decks. Some of you might be thinking that cutting the 3rd Unraveled Earth is the easy choice, but I don't think it's that simple. One thing I've learned from playing Taliyah Malphite in its current state is that it's overly reliant on Unraveled Earth to level its champions fast enough and activate Stonebreaker. Something that I don't like about the deck right now. Hopefully the next expansion will change that. Also, Unraveled Earth does provide some form of card draw. So regarding Stonebreaker, you never want to run more than 2 of these in this deck. It's pretty good once it's activated, but even for this deck, it can be hard to play 4 landmarks by round 6. And you usually need to play Unraveled Earth to get to that point. I used to run 3, and they'd either just sit dead in my hand, or I had to play them for no extra value because I needed something on board to not fall behind. Some people are saying this card sucks, and it needs Overwhelm, but I don't think it does. My main issue with it is needing to play 4 landmarks to activate its ability. I actually think if they lowered the requirement from 4 to 3 and maybe gave this an extra point of health, it would be really solid. The whole idea behind Stonebreaker is that you're going to play Saltspire, copy it with Taliyah, and then maybe slip Stonebreaker in afterwards, and you'll have an instant board. That way, by the time you play Malphite, you don't need Overwhelm because you're going to stun their whole board anyway, and they'll likely only get to play 1 blocker before you attack. If the 3 landmark requirement actually happened, this card would actually be the fire elemental of landmark decks for all my classic Hearthstone players out there. So let's talk about the landmarks really quick. Rockfall Path, it can be replaced by Preservarium. Rockfall Path has been decent overall, but most decks do unfortunately have ways of playing around it. Even control decks, which typically have lower unit counts, will have cards like Vile Feast, and Rockfall Path ends up eating a 1/1 instead of the unit you actually wanted to remove. This deck isn't good at removing small units because it has no access to AoE or anything that pings for 1 or 2 damage, which doesn't help Rockfall Path's case. I initially put it in here over Preservarium because I thought this deck might struggle with targeting problematic units, since things like Rockhopper and Unraveled Earth don't target anything with Rolling Sands and give your opponent the opportunity to play around them. So I figured, why not just overload on those effects with Rockfall Path so that removing units that randomly gained vulnerable from Roiling Sands would allow Rockfall Path to remove anything left over at the end of the turn. Another thing to keep in mind is that Rockfall Path does allow you to instantly win the game against all-in Fiora decks, something you'll see in the gameplay later on. Fiora combo decks currently have no answer for it other than to draw another Fiora or another unit in the case of the Targon versions. The Freljord version is the most consistent at finding more Fioras because of Entreat, but that needs to be in their hand, and Fiora's kill count still resets back to 0 regardless. So if you cut Rockfall Path, just know that the Fiora matchup is no longer an auto win. So the consensus on Saltspire right now is that in this meta, if you spend your round 4 playing a 4-mana landmark, you'll lose the game that you're in because most decks can and will punish you with free damage. Unfortunately, with the current cards we have, this archetype has to play Saltspire, in my opinion. Like I mentioned before, the entire game plan is to copy Saltspire with Taliyah and then get an instant board presence with some fairly big threats on round 6 when the countdown on each one ends. The whole reason it works is because the Saltspires are effectively followers that your opponent can't target with normal removal until their countdowns hit 0. Then they only have 1 turn to deal with them and Taliyah before Malphite hits the board. So I think at least for now, Taliyah Malphite decks need to be built in a way where playing Saltspire doesn't really put them behind on tempo that much, because you'll get that tempo back in 2 rounds, especially if Taliyah's in your hand. The other reason is that it's a lot harder to level up Malphite if you're just playing cheap 2-mana landmarks. It's actually pretty nice that all the landmarks in this deck are even cost, so you always hit exactly 10 mana, when you play enough of them. That's math you have to consider when building this deck in my opinion, and is actually the reason why I'm not running Ancient Preparations, since it's only 1 mana, which helps Taliyah level up, but does almost nothing towards Malphite's level up requirement. I'm also seeing a few players running 5 mana landmarks like Eye of the Raharok or Sandswept Tomb. While they do level up Malphite quickly, since you only need to play 2, or in the case of Eye of the Raharok, just 1 with Daybreak, they're pretty clunky. I think you need to be playing Taliyah on round 5, even if you're not running Saltspire, not a landmark. In general, decks in Legends of Runeterra don't want too many cards costing 5 mana or more that you have to spend normal mana on, so that includes units and landmarks. I've found typically you don't want more than 3 or maybe 4 of those cards at each mana cost, and it's especially true for mid-range decks since they're more unit focused. Moving on to the spells, we're only running 12 spells, which might seem low to some people that have tried to build decks with Taliyah in the past. But when I build decks, I also include landmarks as part of my spell count. So I'm really running 18 spells in this list. I consider landmarks as slow spells that you play onto the board and that don't use spell mana. So Unraveled Earth, I would say, is a core card as well, at least for the time being. I'm not the biggest fan of the card in general, but it's typically needed in order to level up our champions by the mid game. I would run at least 2 copies, but I feel safer playing 3 for now. Think of it as a ramp card, but instead of giving you extra mana, it gives you extra landmarks that count towards flipping both Taliyah and Malphite. 2 landmarks that are 4 mana worth in total. Also, it replaces itself. Ground Slam is part of Malphite's card package, and it does fit very well into this deck, but it's not quite as strong in my experience as others have made it out to be. I'm running 3 copies, but I could actually see going down to 2 copies, especially since Malphite's champion spell is also Ground Slam. It's very good in most games where you've played a landmark, but sometimes you don't draw a landmark early on, and when that happens, this card is a lot weaker. It's a very good card, but I think it's slightly overrated. The rest is pretty standard Targon and Shurima fare. Rockhopper is an overall great card, and in theory, this is the best deck for it. Although in my opinion, Rockhopper itself is pretty bad right now because this is the worst meta to be playing a 3-1 in. Shapestone already does work in other meta decks and is extremely consistent in this landmark focused deck. And Hush is still broken in general, and Nasus is still running around, so that's why it's here. Since the deck itself is fairly straightforward as far as strategy goes, we'll talk about mulligans and the most popular matchups in the current meta. As always, make sure you look at what deck your opponent is running by looking at their champions at the start of the game and thinking about what cards you want to be playing or using to react to your opponent during the first 3 to 4 rounds. You generally want to keep any units that cost between 1 and 3. With opening hands that already have your early game units, you can consider keeping Ground Slam and even Unraveled Earth. But we'll get into specific mulligans when we talk about the matchups, so let's jump into that. So against Thresh Nasus, you want Hush, Blue Sentinel, Merciless Hunter, and if you don't have Blue Sentinel, you can keep Rockhopper, but you're not happy about it. The reason being is that Rockhopper is terrible in this matchup, and that extends to Unraveled Earth as well. Unfortunately, you'll very likely need to play them anyway if you want to level up your champions. But Roiling Sands are easily played around because Thresh Nasus has so many cards that generate 2 units instead of 1, and the Roiling Sands end up targeting the extra follower that was made. Rockhopper is also easy for Thresh Nasus to remove and proc slay. But anyway, if you have some of those first 4 cards I mentioned, then you can keep Saltspire, Ground Slam, and either Chip or Shapestone with a landmark card. Shapestone can help trade with Thresh in the mid game. I've only played a few games against Thresh Nasus, but in theory, it's a tough matchup because of what I mentioned earlier with Roiling Sands, and you need to be careful setting up Malphite with Unstoppable Force if Nasus is already in play. The reason why is that you'll need to hold up mana for Hush in case of an atrocity if your opponent has 7 mana or more. You can't really play around Slay either. The best thing to do is just trade with their units early, since if you don't, you'll take Nexus damage and they're going to activate Nasus by slaying their own units anyway. Alright, against Azir Irelia, you want Desert Naturalist, or the Fangs if you're running that instead, Chip, Blue Sentinel, Merciless Hunter, and Rockhopper. I'd even keep both of your 2 mana followers if they're in your hand. If you have your early game units, then you can keep Ground Slam and I've also kept Unraveled Earth, but it's pretty risky. I'd look to play it very early on if you're going to keep it, since in most games, their first few rounds are spent setting up their engines before they go for any blade dances. And Unraveled Earth only gets worse later on due to that. The best way to slow down Azir Aurelia is to either cut off their engines or cut off their payoff cards. Do not play Desert Naturalist until they play Emperor's Deus. I've gone so far as to hold up that 4 mana and pass instead of playing that other unit I was thinking of playing until they go below 2 normal mana before playing anything else. It's fine to do as long as you have a board and aren't going to die that round. Outside of that, you want to play a unit every single turn in general. Merciless Hunter should be targeting Azir first, then Sparring Student or Greenglade Duo, depending on how low your Nexus is and whether or not you can chump block Student. Ground Slam is for Aurelia first, then Greenglade Duo or Sparring Student, based on the same qualifications as Merciless Hunter. Hush is useful against Duo, but don't look for it in the Mulligan, and just try to ride out the storm that is turns 3 through 6 against this deck. Try not to block blades, mash them on board every single turn, and look at their remaining cards in hand, because just like any other aggro deck, Azir Aurelia will play 2 or more cards from hand every turn, looking to out-tempo you, and they will run out of cards fast when they do. Once they hit top deck mode, you'll start to stabilize. It's definitely easier said than done, but if you can survive until round 6 or 7 with roughly 10 health, the game swings your way. This matchup is close, and I'd rather play against Azir Aurelia with this deck than Thresh Nasus, if I'm being honest. So against Watcher decks, you basically just want units costing between 1 and 3 mana and Saltspire. You just go through with your game plan that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. This deck's job is to react to everything their opponents do until it's time to go for their Watcher Matron combo on turn 8 or 9. So your job is to pressure them with units and force them to spend mana before then. You usually will Unraveled Earth on round 6 if Stonebreaker isn't a play. Ground Slam isn't so great in this matchup, and Hush surprisingly isn't either, since you can't really capitalize on it. Despite their AoE killing some of our units, this deck can do pretty well against Lysandra Trundle as long as you're aware of what they could play each turn with the mana they have. Set up your board and go for the big swing turn with Malphite, Unstoppable Force, and any Taliyahs or Rock Bears you have. Don't worry about their 1 copy of Ruination. If they have it, they have it. And they usually spend their entire turn casting it and nothing else. You're the beatdown in this matchup. In terms of other matchups, Dragons I haven't played against much, but they seem tough in theory. I think you either have to clear their smaller units with Vulnerable so Rockfall Path can remove their bigger units, or trade your smaller units for theirs, level up Taliyah, and have her take out their big units that gained Vulnerable. So it'll be entirely dependent on if you have Rockfall Path in hand or if you have Taliyah in hand. Our champions, once leveled up, line up pretty well with everything they play, except for Asol. But our followers, not so much, since Dragons outsize them. Ground Slam typically gets used defensively to set up a trade with a smaller unit later on. Same with Shapestone, except you use it when attacking, and you have to keep Sharpside in mind when you do that. Draven Ezreal, I usually like to be the aggressor, since we don't have any way of killing Farron straight up, but we have Hush and Ground Slam to slow him down. I try to finish the game by the time the Farron turn happens. Taliyah dies to Culling Strike at level 1 still, so it's better to level her first before playing her. But Taliyah combined with Vulnerable and a landmark in play kills anything in their deck, even Farron. Ground Slam is insane in this matchup, by the way, since it kills both of their champions if they haven't leveled up yet, and they have no way of buffing unit health otherwise. With Hush, just be careful using it into open mana. This goes without saying, but you generally want to wait until your opponent casts a spell first before playing Hush or Shapestone for that matter. Draven Ezreal can just blow your Hush out with removal if you play it out too quickly. But that's it for the guide portion of this video. We're going to jump into some gameplay. If you like what you're seeing so far, be sure to hit the like button just below the video so that way you can let others know in the Legends of Runeterra community here on YouTube about this guide. If you don't want to miss out on future guides, then consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell so you get notified when those videos come out. Thanks for taking time out of your day to watch this. Enjoy the gameplay, and I'll see you next time. Right, discard aggro. Sit up sub goals. Yeah, cause it's worth it. I think I'm gonna play Rockfall Path here. It's really hard to like target something in this matchup with Rockfall Path. Like set up the board in a way where. Oh, it's Draven Ezreal. Actually, Rockfall Path is better against this. I thought this was discard aggro. It's the second time I've actually done that this week. What's Blue Sentinel here? The problem though is I can't Shapestone because they have the axe, which kind of sucks. God, he did that just like a... Yeah, bro, don't even think about it. Don't even think about it. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I can't slack on it. Like, I just need to do it. Do I want to do that? No, not really. I'd rather wait because I don't want this to... Well, I should just do it. I should have just done it. It would have gave me 4 and then I could have Stonebreakered. I still can do it. Alright, so what's nice about this is I can Stonebreaker Draven here. Because now I have 4 out of 4. I mean, they have a chance to stick 3 here. Or they might develop. Oh, they're going for it.
Now we're cooking.
I mean, I can still kill Draven, but the fact that he's flipped now.
And I thought I was already perfect.
You suck. Okay, they must have another flock. Because why would they do this? I don't even think it's worth saving Stonebreaker here. Oh, that's right. I don't have a... Do I give them another action? Do I give them 2 actions here? And try to get them to do something. I think I'm fine doing that. Okay, fine.
History is whatever.
They could blow it out with Scorched Earth. This is kind of a scary board for them. Alright, that's fine.
Why not?
Time for the money makers.
It's fine. I'm not gonna Shapestone. There's no point. Is Ez flipped? No, he's not even close. This might be tough though, cause really, he must have Scorched Earth. Yeah, that sucks.
Now we're cooking. Let's boogie.
All right, so the question is, can he kill me with 3 cards? And the answer is probably not. So I think we just let this go. Although it's really rough taking 5 there, because we don't have healing in this deck. All our damage, whatever damage they do to us, sticks. Oh, okay. Well. Five, 7, 8 is what I'm thinking here.
Sun's beneath me and winds behind me. What a shame for you.
Oh, he's dead, bro. He gonna die.
Now I'm a bee, wing on the head.
Yes, chat. I do bounce around in my chair off stream every time I play Chip. Yes.
Onward,
Yes.
everybody. The horizon calls. Let's put these rocks into motion.
Okay.
Can't steer.
Yeah, we win. It doesn't matter what he blocks. We win the game.
Turn the stone. Set for it.
Got an axe with your name on it. Hey, buddy, what you doing?
It doesn't matter, bro. You can't beat Shapestone, bro.
Let the land do the work.
You can't beat Shapestone, bro. That taking 5 from Draven was mad scary though.
Great day.
It was mad scary. I was like, Monka S? I don't know about this one, Chief. Bold strategy. See if it pays off for him. I just enjoy the challenge, chat. I enjoy the challenge of seeing a top deck that everyone thinks is oppressive and then finding a deck that beats it consistently and is good against the rest of any given meta. That's one of the big reasons I play card games. But I'm in the minority. Most people don't play card games for that reason. They either play to climb and be the best player. They don't care what deck they build. They don't care about deck building at all. Of any capacity, building to beat the meta or brewing. And then other people just want to build fun, cool decks with their favorite cards. To a slightly lesser extent, I'm like that too. I have pet cards, just like everyone else. But
Now I'm a bee, wing on the head. Up I go.
at least here, they're gonna be forced to use spells. Like, if you want to kill,
If it's medicine, I can write it.
if you're gonna kill my stuff, then, you know. I mean, how do we know that though, Sagar? No one's even tried to build a Bilgewater deck. I haven't seen it. Everyone says how weak Bilgewater is. When ironically, some of Bilgewater has a couple things going for it. I don't think Deep is as bad as people say, but you know, Deep's the mentality is that Deep's a meme. I get it. Do we swing for 6, chat? Is the question. Do we swing for 6? Like, what Bilgewater decks were you trying to make? You played MF Aurelia, which was fun, but not as consistent. It did end up being a worse Azir Aurelia. Alright, so they don't have anything for 2 mana that can protect Fiora. That's what that pass tells me. That's what that tells me. And then you have to think about how long did you try those decks out for? Did you play them for like a couple games? Did you? That's the other thing too. I know I'm kind of ragging on like the top players and streamers, and I don't mean to, because I don't hate anybody in the community, but it's just like, to me, like, assuming you're not playing off stream, trying a new deck for like 5 or even 10 games and then declaring it bad afterwards and just putting it down for forever, that's not like that's not like an honest effort to me, because you need to learn how to play decks too. Like there's a learning curve for decks, and like everybody should know that. No, I was asking how long you tried them for. Like, how many games did you try them for? Okay.
Nothing to hold me back.
God, I'm gonna bluff this guy super hard. He's afraid. All right, let's Salt Spire here. What I'm gonna do is just build up enough to like just win on turn whatever. Stonebreaker's not gonna get played here. I think Zillion's best deck right now is probably Lissandra. I know people are doing Lissandra Taliyah, but I think Zillion could fit in there just as well. Not saying that Taliyah doesn't fit, because she does. But a lot of people complain about Turbo Thrall's early game. They have no early game, so aggro just runs them over. That including Azir Aurelia. Are we just holding up Ground Slam here? Is that the play? That might actually be the play. Oh God. Oh chat. Do I just let this go? I think we just let them have this kill. Like, we don't even care. Yo, what's good? I have the Rockfall pass. Do you have any more units, fam? Do you have another ancient preparation? Like, I think I'm just gonna copy this. I was gonna copy. The plan was to Salt Spire, play Taliyah, copy Salt Spire, play Malphite, stun the Fiora, and swing with everything. But I think this is a lot more fun. No, because it obliterates. Chrono Shift doesn't save you. Nothing saves you. Unyielding Spirit doesn't save you. Nothing saves you. Literally nothing saves you. I mean, I don't.
Your move.
Oh man, it's gonna flip. Oh well. Okay. That's probably fine. Actually, no, we can just... Should I just ground slam this and then, like, it dies anyway? It kind of forces another single combat out of him, in a way. Okay. Now he gets nothing. Well, now we win. Rockfall Path, baby. That's why I put it in this deck. God, I remember week 1 of this meta, bro. Week 1, everybody was playing Fiora, and I was just like, bruh, I'm gonna get you. This little card called Rockfall Path. I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you, Fiora. Man, what? That made my day. I just wanted to be able to like win against a Fiora deck with Rockfall Path. That was my only purpose for playing that card, and we did it. Yup, rock. Yup, rock.